Thanks for having me. So again. Let's check now. Who believes that management, the social technology from the industrial age, might be dead? Might be dead. Now a few more hands go up than in the first voting round. That's okay. This is not a joke, and I don't want to tease you with this. Management, the social technology, is dead. That's a fact. I want to prove this point to you, of course. For the time being, I would like to sum up a little bit an impression that you may have. Some people here are from the Telekom Agile community already. You identify yourselves with Agile. You identify yourself with these guiding principles as well that we heard about. You all have a lot of change experience, and probably you have experienced that change is hard, that there are so many barriers to performance and change, that things are not simple at all, that they are difficult and so on. This is the kind of trouble that many organizations find themselves in. Not all organizations are so much under fire as the Deutsche Telekom group, of course. I mean, here the house is really burning. So what do? I mean, we have this trouble. We want to become more agile, but how does it work? And now comes the good part of the message, the good promise, so to say. I can tell you safely, I'm absolutely sure about this, you don't have a people problem. Deutsche Telekom doesn't have a people problem. You have the right people. You may have a few too many there, too few there, and so on, that kind of thing. But you do, and basically, you don't have a people problem. You have a totally different kind of problem. You have a fucked up organization. That's the problem that you have, yeah? To make it at least fun, you know, the Hungarians, they don't look so happy. I want to create a little bit, you know, the guys who were attending there. Here, in this session, it's allowed to laugh, so if you feel like laughing, please do so. We can make a beep, you know, you have a crazy organization. You believe, who of you believes that your organization looks like this? Like an org chart? Oh, lots of hands going up. Yes, many of you believe that your organization looks like this, and this is the big, hairy fucking problem that you have. Your organization, you think that your organization is like this, like a top-down pyramid hierarchy, you know, people, thinkers and managers on the top, doers at the bottom. And this is what management is. I would like you to travel back with me in time. About 100 years ago, management was invented. Management was invented by incredibly smart people, like Henri Fayol here in France, next door, so to say. And the real inventor of management, who knows who that was? Who invented management for us? There's one guy in particular who stands out, an American from Philadelphia. His name was Frederick Winslow Taylor. And he had this amazing idea for organizations for the industrial age. In 1911, he published a book, The Principles of Scientific Management, in which he described the guiding principles of organizing work for the industrial age. And he had this amazing key idea, and I invite you not to forget this ever, please. This is very important. Frederick Taylor suggested that management is the art and the science of dividing the organization between thinkers, or let's put it differently. Frederick Taylor was a liberator. He thought that for organizations to work efficiently, you should liberate the workers from what? From the thinking. That was Frederick Taylor's big idea. The big idea of management, the social technology, is to take the thinking out of the doing and to let people at the top do the thinking for the non-thinkers, for the workers. It may sound like a funny idea, but that is the core, the DNA of management, the social technology. And of course, this has become the standard model of organizing. So if you look at your management practices, what you do at Deutsche Telekom to coordinate, to steer, to do the work, to organize yourselves, to plan, this logic of dividing between thinkers and doers, and information flows up, commands flow down, and then there is execution at the bottom, this has become very much the DNA of our thinking. That is why we are all, as the Americans say, I would never say, we are all fucked because of that, you know? Because the world around us has changed, but we are still driving organizations from the top down, dividing between thinkers and doers. Now, what killed management? There's one thing that killed management. Does anybody know? Management, the social technology, was invented 100 years ago, 104 or 5 years ago, by guys like Frederick Taylor, and then it died. Does anybody know why? Why management, the social technology, died? It wasn't you, it wasn't me. Something happened. The reason is complexity. Complexity killed management in the 1970s. I will explain to you why, but first let's understand what complexity is briefly, because then we can think about what agility means to an organization and will mean to Deutsche Telekom. First of all, here we have two concepts visualized. One is complexity and one is the complicated. In organizations, we always have both things. Neither of them is good or bad, they are just different. There is a difference between the complicated and the complex. The watch that you see at the left is what kind of system? Is it complicated or is it complex? Let's see, complicated, who thinks that it's complicated? Hands up, complicated, some hands going up. Who thinks that it's complex? Please. You're not sure. Okay, there half of you said it might be complicated, half of you said a watch is complex. I will give you a hint. Both kind of systems, a complicated and a complex system, they can both have many parts, many parts. But in a complicated system, the parts are working together in a predefined way. That doesn't change. A complicated system, complicatedness means we don't understand it. So a software, is it complicated or complex? Is it complicated, a software? Complicated or complex? Complicated? Who says it's complicated? Who says a software is complex? Okay, still hands going up with complex. That's totally wrong. Okay, wonderful. A watch. Let's take a watch here. Has many parts, but it is a complicated system. A watch is a complicated system. A robot is a complicated system. Any software is a complicated system. It is controllable externally. Yes, it doesn't create uncertainty. Complicatedness means, and we all use these words interchangeably, complicated, complex, but there's a vital, important difference. Complicated systems can be controlled, and complicated means I don't understand it, but once you understand it, the complicated becomes trivial. Yeah. So what's a complex system? What an example for a complex system? Well, Deutsche Telekom is a complicated system. Every team is a complex system. Any human being is a complex system. And the difference between a complex system and a complicated one is that the complex system creates surprises. Sounds easy, right? Like my wife, or your loved ones, yeah? Some of you have children. Complicated or complex? Yeah? The complicated can be taken apart and put together because it's not alive, but doing this with kids, it's no good. Yeah? So a complex system, it is alive. It creates surprises all the time. That's why it creates uncertainties through the surprises. The parts, the elements of a complex system, they interact in varying and surprising ways. Interaction changes, like when kids grow up and so, and when we learn something. So Deutsche Telekom, of course, is a complex system. But in work, these two worlds, the complicated and the complex, meet each other. There are many agile people here. Many of you work with software, right? IT systems, software, correct? IT systems and software are wonderful to automatize which part of value creation? Complicated or complex? Complicated. Everything that is complicated can, in principle, be codified, automatized. We did that a lot during the industrial age. Now, in work, we have both parts of value creation has both, complicated and complex. Neither is good or bad. It's that in work and in our daily work, we encounter both things, the complicated and the complex. It is totally natural to have that. Now, historically, things have changed over time, and we'd like to walk you through this briefly. Look, before the industrial age, before the telecom era, by the way, before we invented the steam machine and international logistics and so on, and the railways, cars, steamboats and so on, and automatizing, having machinery for production and that kind of stuff. Before the industrial age, when we were still in the age of crafts manufacturing, we didn't really have global markets, only for very few good, like porcelain and spices, we had global markets. But most manufacturers were crafts manufacturers working locally. They didn't even encounter each other. So if you produced a violin here in Bonn, you didn't compete with the guy producing violins in Munich or Cologne. You didn't even encounter them. Those were the days of crafts manufacturing, and we didn't have competition, we didn't have spacious markets. Those only happened and evolved in the industrial age. So in the industrial age, this is where your company comes in, we encounter spacious, slow-moving, exploding markets with little competition, like, well, we all remember those times, right? When you had in the telecom sector maybe one company offering their services, few little competition, monopols and oligopols dominated the markets. Those were that was a great era, by the way. This was fun. And for this kind of dull, slow-moving mass markets, we invented management. And by the way, also project management. Who works with project management here? Project managers or lots of project work, yes, some more on this side, curiously, okay. For this era, we invented project management, also as the notion of, well, some do the project thinking and the others do the doing. That's where we invented Gantt charts and the notion of the powerful project leaders and project budgets and steering tools for project and milestone management, all these things that we now know don't really work anymore. And the why is this. Markets have changed again. They changed from the crafts manufacturing age to the industrial age, and they changed again about 40 years ago when the information or knowledge age started. Now we have crowded global markets with lots of competition where any other company's idea touches us immediately. It doesn't take just 20 years until it touches us, until it makes a difference for us, it makes a difference immediately. So we went from dull, slow-moving mass markets with little competition to highly competitive mass markets. So we went from the golden era of management, and that ended in the 1970s. Around the 1970s, this switch from dull, slow-moving mass markets, oligopolies, monopolies, that ended, and we went into this new era. Well, 40 years ago already. Of course, some markets went faster into this. In the 1970s, there was some first evidence for this switch. For example, there was one production company that was capable of producing cars in a much more efficient way, not in bulk manufacturing mode, but they produced cars in massive quantities, and every car that came from the production line looked different than the other car that came before and after. Which was the company? Toyota. Was one of the first companies to figure out this new way of organizing for highly competitive, highly complex value creation. At that age, the age of the Japanese miracle, as we call it, complexity came back into value creation. In the industrial age, we were able to drive out complexity out of value creation, and we made work complicated, or we even were able to simplify it. Actually, Deutsche Telekom was brilliant in that, to make it simple, to make it non-thinking, so to say, yeah? To make it repetitive. But now, markets, competition, customers have changed, and we have to accept that complexity has already grown back. The messy problem, I'm not sure if you see it. We all got used to a certain way of organizing that was wonderful for the industrial age, this division, Tayloristic division. Thinkers on top, many doers at the bottom, pyramid, command and control, management and steering from the top, lots of planning. Do you still do that? Lots of planning? It has become a luxury. That's the messy part of it. All of this kind of command and control stuff, it has become a luxury that you cannot afford anymore. We don't even have an option. We have to move to another way of organizing. And this is what happens. Even the most messy, most bureaucratic pyramid organization, I'm not talking about Deutsche Telekom, of course. No. But even the most bureaucratic organization that you can imagine, what would that be? Deutsche Post or something? Yeah. Not sure? Yeah. You can think of any organization, or Commerzbank or something, whatever. Even the most horribly command and control steered organization has a peach inside. Every pyramid organization has a peach inside. What does that mean? Look at this organizational model. This is the alternative that we need now, and that actually works within your organization as well. Organizations are not pyramid. You should throw your org charts away. Anybody here responsible for designing org charts? Don't accept them. Don't look at them. Don't do that anymore, please. Because it creates a confusion. We think, oh, my boss is important. No, bosses are not important anymore. I will show you why. It's not that bosses are the problem, again. People, even managers, are not your problem. The problem is that we accept that command and control or centralized steering still works. And it doesn't. I will show you why. Systems theory or complexity theory told us already 80 years, 50 years, 40 years ago that organizations are not really pyramids. They don't have tops and bottoms. They don't have heads and bottoms. You know? Organizations are actually, they only know inside and outside. Outside of an organization, you always have something wonderful, beautiful, that is market. Yeah? Outside the organization, you have a market. Clients, shareholders, banks lending you money, competitors, you know, university or the employee market, all of that is market for you. It's outside the organization. In the pyramid, remember, clients and the market don't even appear. It is just top and bottom, managers and workers. That's one of the fundamental flaws of any org chart. Now, this is different. The Peach model of organizing, that actually exists in Deutsche Telekom. It says an organization doesn't have top and bottom. It knows just two different parts of the organization, center and periphery. And what is the difference between center and periphery? Look at the graphic, you see it there. The periphery has something that the center doesn't have. That is very important. Do you see it? Only the periphery touches the market. Now, what happens in an organization that is Tayloristic, command and control? Usually centralized, which means and the periphery meets a customer, for example, you know, some kind of customer, the market. There is an impulse from the market, from the client. The information about this, you put it into SAP, or do you use Oracle? No, SAP probably, right? Lots of SAP. Oh, SAP is wonderful. For taking the information from the periphery to the center, there somebody has already decided and put some algorithm into the SAP software, or he or she decides, you know, the center decides, the decision goes back as a command to the periphery, and then the periphery can act. Do you recognize this? I'm not criticizing. This is what centralization and management looks like, what it works like. And that was perfect for the industrial age. Remember, complicated markets, spacious markets, little competition? This works very well when you can repeat the same thing 1 million times, 10 million times. Centralized steering is perfect for complicated markets. What was the problem, right? The problem with markets today is that complicatedness is still there. There is some complicatedness there in your work and your markets. But the most important thing these days is not the complicated, but the complex. So in complexity, what happens is that customer demands become more volatile, more diverse. And imagine this centralized decision making. So you always have to do this kind of flow here to the center and back. This takes a long time. It is expensive to do this. It is slow. It creates bureaucracy. And also, there's something fatal. Once markets become more dynamic and customer demands more diverse, something fatal happens in the periphery. Do you see it? When the market becomes more interesting and complex, the periphery learns. It learns because it touches the market. It has direct market contact. That is terrible. Why is it terrible? Because steering collapses. Do you see it? If the periphery learns, and that has been the case in Deutsche Telekom for 40 years, this horrible thing has been going on for 40 years. The periphery has learned. And you try to steer against it. Or one could also put it like this. If the periphery learns by touching the market, the center doesn't touch the market, it doesn't learn. What does that mean? That the center becomes dumber. And if you allow for centralized steering to continue, your whole organization becomes dumb. That is what you have in your organization. Your organization is stupid, more stupid than it should be, because you still try to steer from the inside out. And that is fatal in complexity, because only the periphery can know those things that are changing, those interesting things about the market, about the competition, about the client. So what we need now, since the 1970s, is not centralized steering, centralized decision-making. You actually need, and I'm not sure if you have faced this and to what degree you have done this already, you have to switch to decentralized decision-making. In today's markets, centralized steering collapses because of market dynamics and complexity. So we have to switch to radical decentralization of decision-making. And this is not a question of I like it, I don't like it. It is the only way to run an organization in today's markets. This is a physical fact. Any engineers or physics people with a physics diploma? It's like, you know, if I hold this up and let it go, then it falls down. That is physics. And this is the physics of organizations, of work, of organizational development. We have to move towards radical decentralization. Of course, agile. Agile work methods. You may call them Scrum, Kaizen, Kanban, whatever you like. Most of that comes from Toyota anyway. And that's good, because they were some of the inventors of all of this, of how to do this in a large organization. Agile does this thing of radically decentralizing decision-making, radically going from command and control steering through bosses to team-based self-organization. Agile does this for projects, but what you need now is to transform your entire organization. And I believe that this will happen in incredible speed. In no time, this will happen, or you will vanish. Most of you probably know that some of your competitors have more capability of decentralized decision-making. They are already more agile than you. So the problem that you have to solve is not to make yourself more intelligent or have better people. You have exactly the right people, but the system that you have is partly crap. I will show you why. Do you agree that your system is crap? Okay. Some said yes, I accept that, It's not you, it's lots of history, lots of time has gone on, and you add things to the system. What we have discovered is that there are already, in this world, we already have both models. We have the Toyotas of this world on the right side, the DM Drogeriemarkts, the Southwest Airlines, or Handelsbanken, the biggest Swedish bank. We have the W.L. Gores. You have heard of many of these companies, or like Zappos from the USA and so on. So there are some, even many pioneers of this model, of this radically decentralized peach model. We have lots of examples. But of course, for an organization that has a little more history and that is very big and that comes from this kind of monopolistic mass markets, it seems hard to change. Now, it's not that hard to make it change. You just have to switch from one kind of principles that I call alpha, management principles, I call them alpha, to beta. It seems fair, easy enough, right? It's not that simple, of course. You have to change to a different paradigm if you want to decentralize decision-making, if you want to create agile teams within the whole organization. You have to change ways of organizing. For example, who here has a bonus, gets a bonus, an invisible bonus? A bonus is defined by the following. You have a target, and there is a monetary incentive attached to it. That is a bonus. Who of you receives a bonus? Many of you? Yeah? Okay, that has to go. Is it clear why? Incentives are perfect for industrial age, theory X people who don't want to think, who are not motivated, for donkeys and little animals and people who have to be, stupid people. The problem is that you don't have that. The problem is you don't have the people. But the funny thing is, this theory X thinking about other people, they are just not motivated, so we have to motivate them extrinsically. This kind of thinking actually creates the problem. So if I incentivize you with bonuses, like carrots for donkeys, carrot and stick, I actually will get selfish behavior and self-optimizing behavior, and I don't care about the team because I have to manipulate my bonus, my targets and so. So this whole notion of management by objectives, pay for performance, I don't know exactly what you have here at Deutsche Telekom. I imagine that you have the whole bunch of things on the bottom, right? Yes. So this is what has to change. You don't have the wrong people. You have the right people who are driven by totally wrong practices. And I can only advertise something here that Edward Deming, one of the people who inspired the Toyota way, the Toyota model, one of my heroes, he said that already 40, 50 years ago. He said, in 95% of the problems that we encounter, we make ourselves believe that people are the problem. The root cause is people. But in 95% of the problems, the problem actually comes from processes, is said here, from the system. The system. The system creates the problems, not the people. And of course, the system doesn't appear. It doesn't show up at work. People show up at work. So it looks like we are all idiots, But human beings are fantastic. We can adapt to any crap. And if my organization deals with me like, creating individual targets which is actually nonsense because individuals don't really perform, only teams perform. Your top manager here, he said something very interesting, yes, our colleague talking before. He said, well, teams actually create performance. That is true, but we also have to add, it's never individuals who create performance. That is the whole notion of agile project work as well, right? The team is the smallest unit of creating performance. Of course, individuals contribute to that, they have to work. But performance is team-based, not individual. So all individual targets, all bonus systems, they should be scrapped immediately. I can only recommend you, I'm not sure if you will do this, but you should. You should cleanse the organization of methods that have never worked, or that have never worked in complexity, and that only work for theory X people, for these demotivated, lazy people that don't actually exist. Some organizations have made this switch already, from pyramid to peach, from management or alpha principles to beta or radically decentralized peach principles. Some organizations have been born like this. You probably know many startups that still have this kind of radical decentralized decision making. Then when organizations grow, they change. Some organizations have been, I'll get back here. Some organizations have transformed into this peach model of organizing. Some organizations have never left it. For example, W.L. Gore or Google are good examples for organizations that have reasonably maintained this peach kind of radical decentralized organization, eliminating management practices all the time and the tendency to turn themselves into pyramids. So there are pioneers of this new model, and I can tell you this. This is what I call the $1 billion slide. You should actually take a photo of it. Well, you can get it on the web as well. Of course, you can get it on your internet later. Do you know what this is? Who knows what this is? I call this the €1 billion slide or the $1 billion slide for you because do you recognize what this is? I mean, do you have all this? Probably, right? All of this exists in Deutsche Telekom. And all of this is part of the problem. This is a problem that you have. You do not have stupid people. This is stupid. All of this is stupid. I will give you an example. You have managers calling other people in, imagine doing that at home to your loved one. Honey, come in, we'll have our annual performance appraisal. We are well organized. We are a well-organized household. We identified key performance indicators for you 12 months ago, so I measured, and I can tell you, honey, in advance, you performed well in some of the indicators, and others, there's lots of proven potential. We would negotiate targets next week when we sit down more calmly and talk about it. Whoever did this at home? This is the kind of, and do you have performance appraisal at Deutsche Telekom? I'm pretty sure. Sometimes I check, and I can tell you this: that is a practice that has to go. That you will never ever become an agile organization if you only try to optimize those messed up, fundamentally flawed practice. You have to eliminate them. All these practices belong on the garbage heap of history. We would never do performance appraisal with our loved ones because performance appraisal is this. I evaluate you. Shut your mouth. We make it participative. You can also give me feedback as a boss, but, that's just a joke. So performance appraisal, it never happens at home because it cannot work in a Augenhöhe relationship, as we now call it in Germany, in a conversation on eye level. In a dialogue, there is no way of evaluating each other. It doesn't, our sex is bad, you are to blame, you're guilty and that kind of stuff, Doesn't make much sense, In companies, like Deutsche Telekom, we consider it normal. That is part of the big problem. We have to abolish, let's not we. You are the people who have to work on eliminating these practices. Deutsche Telekom doesn't suffer from not knowing how to do things. You don't need to do more and new stuff. You have all the things, probably, so there are some incredibly experienced people here with Agile and Scrum. You can do this. What you cannot allow is for this kind of practice to continue into the future. You have to stop doing this. This is the bullshit list. This is the list of things that have to go. Oh, somebody turned it off. Okay, why was that? It is just a proposal. You don't have to do it. I'm proposing it to you. This is worth so much time. Imagine all of this goes away. You have so much time to do the real work, to do agile project work. What's the difference between management and pyramid and a peach and so on? And this was mentioned before. Self-organizing means letting go of command and control. On the right side, you see self-organization. Self-organization doesn't mean firing the bosses. The bosses are not the problem. The problem is the boss that wants to be the boss in the work. Who wants to command, who makes decisions while it should be, collective decisions or decisions made by other people. So the problem is not bosses. The problem is that you have to put a system in place for self-organization and not for top-down steering. This is one of the challenges. You also will need practices and methods to have not centralized coordinations through bosses and top silo managers. Coordination can actually happen, like in our economy, somewhat market-based, between teams directly, without managers coordinating or arranging the resources. By the way, do managers have the resources here at Deutsche Telekom? Where does the money come from? In most organizations, we think they come from the top, right? Which is funny. And who pays our salaries? Oh, it must be HR, right? And that is the funny notion that we aren't aware that customers actually pay our salaries. Because the periphery in that's why you have to let go of, there's something that drove me into this. Many of you probably are here today because they are in touch with Agile. Yes? Yeah, you got in touch with Scrum or Agile, or you're at least slightly remotely interested in it. I came into this work, into this community that we are all part of, I believe, through the question of budgeting, actually. I was a corporate controller, a finance guy, and I did a lot of budgeting. And then there were people telling me that there were incredibly successful organizations not doing budgeting at all. So one of the things that you will have to learn to let go of is budgeting. Are you aware of that? Budgeting has become a silly way of organizing. Budgeting is perfect, again, for complicated, predefined, foreseeable futures. But if you have dynamics, complexity, surprise, then budgeting and planning is the most silly way to try to deal with the future. Of course, what Agile teaches us is to work in an iterative way and not planning. And delivering fast and continuous and not delivering once a year at the year end and that kind of stuff. So we have to also let go of budgeting and from, the budget's raining from God, down from the heavens and from gods and top management. Yeah. What we also have to unlearn is to organize functionally. I know from what I hear that you have some functional organization in place, silos and so on. That was good enough for the industrial age, but in complexity, we need self-organizing teams and not silos, which means also we have to dissolve functional organization and reintegrate different functions into multifunctional teams. Actually, each and every one of you is able to perform different functions and different roles at the same time or, over a day. So functional organization is something like a flawed thinking from the industrial age that we have to let go of. Organizations, of course, like Google, Southwest Airlines, Toyota, they have overcome this financial hierarchy and have moved to functionally integrated like mini business teams in the periphery that have power to use resources and that also have to show their results and be responsible for that. Okay. One more thing that I want to tell you about is this. You probably don't remember the days when Deutsche Telekom was founded, right? But it once was probably something like a startup, It started somewhere. Back then, it was already what I call a beta organization or a peach organization. But those days are gone. At some point in time, this organizations like the Siemenses and the ThyssenKrupps and the Deutsche Banks of Germany, for example, your organization grew and added layers to it and created hierarchy and functional division and departments. And that all seemed to work well enough in the industrial age. Now we know that it cannot really work in complexity. So we created this kind of pyramid organization with thinkers at the top, doers at the bottom. Of course, there is an alternative to that. And some companies like Toyota after Second World War, or Handelsbanken 40 years ago, or Semco in Brazil in the 1980s, some organizations have managed to transform themselves from this pyramid kind of organization to the peach organization, to the radically decentralized organizations. This is possible. If you only take this away from this session, I'm happy. Transformation is possible. DM Drogeriemarkt has done it in the 1990s, and probably most of you know that company and know how incredibly successful they are, in spite of selling the same stupid toothpaste. You know? It's just the same that you can buy anywhere. But for the rest, for the competition that maintained in command and control mode, it was very difficult. In German, I always say, der Wettbewerb, für den hat sich's ausgeschleckert. Yeah, this is not translatable into English. So the thing is not, you don't have to be better. You don't need better products fundamentally. Of course, you have to update and change with technology that's in the market. Of course, you have to do this. But the secret sauce to your organization is not this technology innovation or driving that or being part of it or being fast enough. You can do that. The problem is with the wrong organizational model. I think you figured out which is the wrong model, right? Yeah. You cannot do this effectively and efficiently and fast enough. You need a different model. It is not an option, it is mandatory. It is a question of survival. So this is not a question. I would like to offer you this idea. You may find it hard to imagine this kind of organization within Deutsche Telekom, of course. But the question is not if you like it or not, if you believe me or not. The fact is that complexity already killed the model on the left. There is another fact, that within your organization, there already is the peach on the right. You have that. You have this value-creating structure. But it is condemned to be on the backstage. Organizations like yours are like theaters. There is a front stage. You have actors or speakers there, or Vorstände, or top managers, or Kader, as they say in Switzerland. But every organization also has a backstage where the real work happens. Actually, most top managers don't have the slightest clue what happens in value creation and in real organizations. They kid themselves by reading reports, by reading the org chart, by having meetings, that they understand the organizations, but they don't. And all of you already working with Agile know that most managers don't have a slightest clue about how value creation actually works. Fine enough, good enough, you can survive with that. But you have to shed more light on the backstage, you have to work on the backstage, you have to make the backstage more powerful, you have to train it like a muscle. Because it's the backstage that currently at Deutsche Telekom guarantees survival. So this is for all the Agilists here. Don't wait for management to wake up. They are on the front stage, that's fine enough, but we all have to collectively change the organization's system. You cannot wait for top management to drive it. We all have to agree on changes, like throwing many practices on the garbage heap of history. Thank you very much.